Cloud adoption is ramping up, but prevention-based security isn't enough for the hybrid attack surface. That's why Gartner predicts that 60% of enterprise security budgets will go towards detection and response in 2020. ExtraHop Reveal X Cloud delivers cloud-native network detection and response for the hybrid enterprise, the only SaaS-based NDR solution for AWS. Request a 30-day free trial of Reveal X Cloud at extrahop.com/trial. That's extrahop.com/trial. Keep your company and products relevant, competitive, and reliable by standardizing your security framework to protect intellectual property, become a reliable business partner, and guard financial and customer information. Standards Connect is an online standards management solution from ANSI. It's standards access simplified. Standards Connect is a cost-saving, fully customizable solution for entrepreneurs and companies that spend $2,000 or more per year on standards and want to translate spend into a subscription model, want to simplify access, search, monitoring, and collaboration, or need a centralized hub of standards for multiple users at one or more locations. Get a free trial at securityweekly.com/ANSI. That's /ANSI.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. Register for our last webcast of the year with Core Security by going to securityweekly.com. Click the webcast drop-down and select registration. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them in our on-demand library by selecting On Demand from the webcast drop-down. If you attend any of our webcasts, you will receive 1 CPE credit per webcast. And don't worry, webcasts are coming back in January. Also, mark your calendars for our Security Weekly Holiday Extravaganza. On December 19th, Security Weekly will be live streaming 5 of our 1-hour panel discussions with some of the most knowledgeable professionals in the industry. To round out the evening, Ed Scotus will be joining the Security Weekly host to give his annual announcement about the CounterHack Holiday Hack Challenge. You can view the live stream on our YouTube channel or by visiting securityweekly.com/live. We hope to see you there. We'll have, I think, somewhere around 30 people in studio for this live event. All right, gentlemen, let's dig into some articles. The first one I brought in was the CISO interview with the CISO from Maersk, Andy Powell. Jason, I know you probably got some interesting notes on this one, but when I read this, I scrolled down to one section of this article, which I thought was kind of the highlights of this interview. How do you unify your security organization's mission and mindset? And he lays out 5 points for CISOs. And so I thought this was a really interesting piece to dig into. I didn't know if your notes extracted this out or not.
Yeah, no, actually, that was one of the pieces I brought out, right? I mean, it was pretty good. I mean, the article actually went through the beginning when he was actually, looking to make the move and why he made the move, right? He looked at the business itself, and said, "Wow, this is going to be an innovative company that I can jump into. They're making a lot of changes." He did his research and found that the business leaders at the top had support for security. The business was fully on board with, having a security strategic mindset. So it went through, number one, the why. Why did he decide to jump in, especially after they had, a security incident that was, pretty well known? I mean, he was jumping into the fire. So what really made him want to go in and attack that role out of the gate? And it was those items, right? The business being innovative, support for security, and then all the business leaders and the peers across having that level of support.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good lesson for CISOs that are joining an organization. Do you have that same level of confidence in the leadership buys into cybersecurity? They're going to work on innovation, and I can make an impact there to actually build a secure, innovative set of transformations, right? And he felt he could. Yeah. And I think that's a good set of interview questions for CISOs walking into a potential employer and understand those 3 same things for themselves to see if there's a good fit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he actually made a really he kind of drew the line in the sand, right, with one of his comments that I read, and it was, the section was, "What do you have any advice for CISOs?" And he brought out the fact that, listen, I report to the CIO, but I have a dotted line to the CEO. And if you're any CISO out there in the industry and you don't have that level of a dotted line, that means the organization's not embracing you. That means there's a component of business decision making that you're not going to have a part of, that you're not going to have a seat at the table for. and he really pushed for that strategic seat at the table, having that ability to have either a dotted line or a seat at the table with the CEO and a board to be able to be part of that strategic decision making for the company.
Yeah, you have not a dotted line to the CIO position since you're the same, and then you've got a full line to the CEO. So.
Right, exactly.
But it speaks to it speaks to the culture of the organization too, because a good company is going to be okay with that, right? Red flag goes up if you don't have that. Maybe that means the CIO doesn't want you going over his or her head to get to the CEO because they're uncomfortable for whatever reason. And it's a great point because that could be a reason why you don't want that position.
Exactly. It's one of those scenarios where do you want your message being filtered up to the board or up to the executive leadership, or do you want to be able to have that direct communication so it's unfiltered?
Yeah. I want to get on these 5 points real fast because I think these are, and we talk about a lot of these on this show. The first is trust, right? How do you unify security? You have to build trust, right? I mean, we talk about the trust factor on this show a lot, and he points it out as his number one.
That was amazing. I mean, it's funny. A lot of times we'll see things kind of flip back to that military mindset in security, right? And one of when he was answering this question, he basically said, "Listen, I came from the military, so I put into place these key operating principles like we do in the military, and that's what these 5 things came out of." And when you look at the root of relationships and the root of strong, high performing teams, trust is always that foundation. Right. That's how you gain. That's how you gain strong relationships. It's also how you gain influence across the organizations. You have to, number one, build trust.
Yep. Then he talks about resilience and building resilience in the business and in the systems. Obviously, we've heard that one before. And then he brings up responsibility and accountability, and it separates them. Right. There's a level of responsibility, and then there's accountability for security in the organization. Both great points as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think these are items we don't focus enough on, because the responsibility and the accountability factor, you have to look at it like this, like this life cycle, because that's what helps you build trust. If you're responsible for certain aspects of the organization and you're executing against it, you're building trust. If you're accountable, good, bad, or indifferent with what's going on in the organization, and you just have that level of accountability where, you can admit, any failures that may have happened and how you're going to remediate those, or, have the level of accountability to take on certain tasks within the organization. That's another trust builder, right? So these kind of fall into each other, where if you're taking responsibility for actions and you're taking accountability for what's going on within your organization, you're constantly building trust.
Mm-hmm. And then that last one, I love this one. Security is a benefit, not a burden, right? It's working with the business. And he talks about this as a big call out for his team to say, look, we're here to benefit the business, not to burden the business.
100%. It's the mindset that every modern day security team needs. How are you becoming a business enabler, and how are you leveraging security as a competitive advantage? We have to be having those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it can be tough for those in the security organization to wrap their brains around that. And one thing I think I start with it most of the time, and there's multiple aspects, but I think that simpler means it's easier to secure, but simpler also means it's more efficient for the business. I think oftentimes we make things way too complicated in our business processes, in our IT processes, and that inevitably leads to some type of exposure or condition that can get you into trouble from a business sense or from a security perspective. Security's got a great opportunity to come in and help simplify some of those things that, again, it's better for the business. And, oh, by the way, it just happens to be more secure as well.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, right? I mean, those are all the reasons why IT and security have had the stigma over time of being, the organizations of no, the departments of no, is because we put all of this complexity out there that we can't get out of our own way to be able to enable the business or make the business more efficient or more effective in a timely fashion. So at the end of the day, the law of unintended consequences, and now you have all this shadow IT and people working around our organizations and around our departments. But you're absolutely dead on. We have the opportunity now to rethink things and help simplify while we're being seen as a business enabler.
Yeah, exactly right. So the second article gets into, we hear a lot about artificial intelligence and algorithms, and this article talks about what leaders need to know. And what's interesting is the first part of the article talks a lot about why, what kind of the why of artificial intelligence. And what this article is really saying is, look, it's not really about the why. It's about what are you using these algorithms for? And those are the types of questions you need to ask. Instead of worrying about the why, really get into some of the aspects of what are these things trying to optimize? Are there valid use cases for them? Questions I think sometimes we don't ask because we get a little enamored with this concept of artificial intelligence.
I think a lot of the technologies in use really aren't anywhere close to artificial intelligence, right? It's really just smart algorithms. It's a great article pointing that out, that you have to choose the right algorithm. Sometimes that might be classified as something as artificial intelligence. Sometimes it won't, right?
Yeah, no, agreed. It's a lot of what they used in here as use cases again is high-end machine learning or something of that that effect. But the part that about this article that interested me the most is the legal aspect of it, right? Because if you dig down into the article, they start talking about an example of the Houston Federation of Teachers, where they had this machine learning algorithm that was basically, judging their performance. And at the end of the day, it went all the way up through the court system, and they found that it violated the 14th Amendment of due process because the algorithm was proprietary, and the third party who wrote the algorithm wasn't willing to say how the algorithm was built and what it was built to do, and the legal system basically squashed it, right? So I'm looking at a future of, if you're not understanding exactly what this algorithm does that you're building, and you're not able to explain it in layman's terms enough to bring it into the legal system and have an explanation for it, I'm not sure you're going to have a legal defense going into 2020, 2021, and into the future, right? I mean, it's that part really hit home for me.
And there are some other potential ramifications of some of these algorithms. There's been a lot of talk about how some of these algorithms are gender biased or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. To your point, that could open up a really interesting set of legal cases in place around some of these algorithms as well, which could put a company at risk potentially for a lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, the article says, a lot of these AI platforms are considered black box, right? Because nobody really understands in true depth of what it does, except for the people who created it. And I mean, it literally points out there that's not going to be a strong legal defense ever going into the 2020 and beyond. That's not going to be a strong legal defense.
Interesting.
Well, don't forget.
I mean, it even notates GDPR, right? Which basically says that companies are required to be able to explain the decisions that are being made by these algorithms. It's a requirement.
And don't forget, in a security context, what does it mean for you, based on the algorithm, right? Is it like a scene from that horrible movie Pixels? I mean, it wasn't that horrible, I guess, but where they could basically figure out the algorithm, right, and know how to beat all the video games. And I think we lose sight of that. These things have been around since the beginning of computing. Even before computing, they were talking about artificial intelligence, of course. I mean, it was classes on it, you know what I mean? So it certainly is interesting in today's context, some of the social aspects it brings up. But I don't think we're armed as consumers in the enterprise space to know, I think, enough how to test algorithms for our own stuff and how to evaluate them for our security practices.
Yeah, agreed.
Why constraints are good for innovation. So this article starts off saying, well, look, if you could get rid of regulations and all kinds of other things, we could create lots of innovation in the space. So they went out and they do this research to find out, well, if there were no constraints, would innovation be better or worse? And the findings were actually very interesting, right? Is that without constraints, we take the least path of resistance. So we take the intuitive choice instead of really challenging ourselves to find maybe that more challenging solution to the problem. And where with constraints in place, you're forced to do that. And so it was a really interesting set of results that I thought was interesting because we talk a lot about innovation on the show, and what are some of the ways to create innovative environments? It's not removing all constraints. There has to be some level of constraints in place based on what this research is pointing to.
Yeah, I mean, this article really made me go back in time and look at different projects that my team's been part of, and it's kind of funny when you look at some of the more innovative models and architectures that we've designed here. It's when we had all of these strange constraints, whether it be funding or human capital or regulations that we needed to meet or some compliance things that we needed to meet. It forced us to get out of our comfort zone. Right? It really did. It forced us to sit at the table and really think through step by step everything that we were architecting or building because of all the constraints that we had in place and all of the different things we needed to be thinking through. So, it really did. It made me take a step back and think of all the things that are done. And it's true. In those instances where we had all of these different constraints, either from the business or from a legal perspective or, from our clients putting policy on us, it's really forced us to get out of our comfort zone. Think outside the box.
Yeah. Paul, do you remember my one technology constraint when you were doing research in the lab? My constraint was you can't connect the internet to the internet by trying to shove it through a tiny little straw, right?
Yeah,
I didn't want us to artificially come up with tunnels or VPNs or things to take a highly disconnected world, connect it to assets anywhere in the planet, but then shove it through some control plane, right? And when you put a constraint on that, you really start to think about, well, wait, what kind of technologies could I do that? Well, I'm not going to use a CASB to do that. I'm not going to use a VPN to do that. How would I do that otherwise, right? I did it because I wanted to push us to think to where the future technology was going to go, which is any user can connect to any resource anywhere in the world, and you don't want to restrict or put something in their way to do it, but yet you wanted to secure it. And that was a very interesting constraint we used in the lab when we tested out different solutions to see if we were interested in building and or acquiring.
Yeah, and it's a great example of a constraint that breeds innovation.
Absolutely, because it forces you to do things like in the container space, embed capabilities into the container instead of using a privileged container or a kernel plugin, right?
Because we're all bound by constraints of physics in reality, unless we're developing for science fiction, in which case all the constraints are pretty much off the table, unless you create them from the start, right?
Right. True. Vanessa Van Edwards is back. I finally got an article post that was like, oh, well, hey, we haven't seen signs of people lately. And she walks through the 3 steps for doing a digital detox. And I thought this was interesting because I'm bad at this stuff, right?
Me too.
I am
so bad.
Constantly connected to my phone, my email. My wife is just like, right? So maybe over Thanksgiving, I'll try to figure this out for a little bit. But she goes through kind of her 3 steps to do a digital detox, which I thought was interesting for anybody who wants to do that. And, the first question is, what do you want a digital detox from, right? For me, it's email. It's definitely email. I got to get off email.
Yeah, I think you got to pick and choose, right? You can't. I mean, there is an all or nothing. You got to turn it off sometimes, right? All or nothing from the digital realm. But I like not just a detox. Detox is one thing, but like a permanent purging of it can be great, right? Oh, I'd love to do that with email. Everybody knows how much I've always hated email and still do to this day, right? But sometimes we adopt technologies, and I think sooner rather than later, we got to learn to get rid of them if they're not providing value to ourselves, to our team, to our business. You got to know when to pull the ripcord and go, yep, that's out. A temporary detox could help you make that decision.
Yeah. In her case, it was social media, which I don't do a lot of anyway, so I'm okay with that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's such a balance, right? Because part of the article actually talks about what if my job makes a detox tough, and I mean, for me, I have to be connected, right? I have to be connected to the business. It's funny, like even at home, right? We have this thing where we got to get off technology. We're reading books at home, where we're getting off the Xbox, just so we're going outside and playing some sports with the kids, just so they get that, that digital detox in their own life where you can kind of pull away and it's not as hard to pull away. And I get flack all the time. Why are you checking your email? Well, I got something going on at work. Well, why are you checking your email right now? Right? It's like, can't you check it in 20 minutes? So, it's almost like I feel bad because I should be modeling the way. but when your job makes it tough, you kind of have to find that balance, right? So some of the things I said in the article was, try it during a vacation. Right? Try when you go on vacation, disconnecting and seeing if that works.
Yeah, but
you have
it's
a temporary
hard.
Detox, right?
On the platforms that we have today, that's hard because if I try and mute my phone or turn off notifications, and then all of a sudden look down at my watch, like, what? I called you. Where were you? I texted you. I need this extra thing. And there was a company, and I don't remember who it was. I'm sure some of our listeners might, that was producing a phone that was basically you got calls and you could send and receive text messages, right? So it really limited your scope because oftentimes when you're with your family, sometimes you need to be able to answer a call or send a text message because it's relevant to your vacation, right? I mean, when you go to Disney, you need to make calls, receive calls, text messages, and you need the Disney app, and that's it, right? But it's really hard on many device platforms and many different devices to have that level of separation. So it's almost like you need two devices, right? One that your communications of phone calls and not that many people call, right? But text messages, and then there's a device for everything else.
Right. Yeah, it's tough, right?
Yeah, and to one of your points, right? I have this with my son all the time. How do you fill the void so he's not on the game or we're not on the phone, right? So filling the void is a big part of this 3-step process. Is you got to find something else so you're not tempted to go back and get on that. Now, for my youngest son who loves his Switch, right? It's let's go outside and play baseball. But when there's 4 inches of snow and 10 more coming, that's not that easy a thing to do. So you got to find something to keep them busy to fill the void so they can get off the digital device. And her last point, my wife does this every Lent. She goes off Facebook for Lent, but she announces it to everybody. She's like, look, I'm off Facebook, from now until Lent's over. And she always does this as kind of her annual thing. And it's great. It gives her that kind of that detox from Facebook, but she also lets everybody know. So nobody's worried about, hey, where's Lauren? Because she's off. And that's kind of step number 3 is let people know that you're taking a detox. That way you don't freak anybody out when you don't respond.
Yeah, I think the other part of that too, commit loudly. I mean, they say that for people who are dieting or exercising, commit loudly because it almost gives you a level of accountability with it, right? Because now if you're saying to everybody, I'm doing this, and you don't follow through, now you haven't had the accountability and you haven't followed through. Now it's out there, it's communicated out to the public that you're actually committing to do this.
Yeah, exactly right. Next article is on remote workers. I've been remote since 2009. So this was an interesting article for me because how do you make friends when you're a remote worker, right? Now, I had the advantage of I was traveling into headquarters. So I was meeting people face to face. I go into studio once a month. We spend time as a team, right? So it's a little different in that respect. What this talks about is people who are remote and basically remote all the time. They rarely meet face to face and in person, and it talks about what kind of people uses is a way to determine whether a friendship can come out of the way you interact in a remote setting. It talks about this concept of cadence, right? It is from a cadence, you get into a cadence with your remote workers. And then based on aspects of that cadence, you start to either build bonds or don't build bonds from a friendship perspective, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, this article was extremely timely. I mean, just last week, I was having a conversation with one of our folks in marketing, and he's 100% remote. And we were talking. I'm just like, I don't know if I could do that. I love having FaceTime with people. I love being able to have face-to-face conversations with people. And I don't know if I could work remote from home without being able to do that. Now, obviously, with technology, you can have video meetings and things of that nature. But for me, it's the human contact, right? And it's funny because his response to me was, "Man, I love it. I'm an introvert. I absolutely love it. I'd rather be, communicating over Teams or over text message or through a Teams meeting or something like that. So, it's part of it. I think is personality, because even if I was a remote worker, I would try to find some way to get into the office to have human interaction with my colleagues.
Right. And some people are better at just communicating via the text, via Slack, via whatever. And that's part of that cadence, right? Is understanding when an issue comes up or you're trying to get an answer from somebody, how are they going to communicate that? How quickly are they going to get you an answer back? Are they providing value? That's all part of this cadence thing. And it doesn't have to be face-to-face. It doesn't have to be a Zoom connection. It can literally be text and still get that level of cadence and confidence across.
Absolutely. I mean, like within any relationship, it's putting the time in, right? I mean, one of the aspects of the article said, be proactive, make an effort. I mean, it's one of those things where, make an effort to have a weekly touch point with a colleague that you get along with, or you can run ideas by. It's realizing whether or not, you click. And if you truly click with someone in the workplace, start seeding that relationship, right? And try to build it.
Yeah. Just don't use Google Hangouts because performance-wise it stinks. All right, last article, the 5 major trends for top skills. Look, we talk again about the people side of this. And I pull out these kind of reports because I think they're interesting for people who are hiring in the space. What are people still looking for? I think it's also good for people who are looking as well to really understand kind of those skill sets people are looking for. And there's some interesting findings out of here. First one, soft skills are of interest, but tech chops still on top, which means, look, people are looking for the technology skills still way more than they're looking for the soft skills, which is something we try to help with on this show, because I can't help you with your tech skills.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that it was still that high. I think it was 74% said that they value the tech skills over soft skills. I thought it would be a little bit more balanced, where you're talking about, like we talk about in our industry all the time, is attitude and aptitude, right? I mean, you have the right attitude because we're in a service industry. Maybe that's why, but we want to make sure that customer service and really that customer centric attitude is there. Along with the technical skills. So yeah, I was surprised it was that high.
Well, and I think technical skills a lot of times are overstated, right? Because every candidate, if the job requires some technical skills, regardless of what they are, you have to have some tech skills to even be considered for that position. You can't have zero knowledge of computers in general, and companies say, oh yeah, we don't really value tech skills that high when we hire, right? That's not necessarily true either. I think that what they likely mean is that they've got some relevant technical skills, and they don't have to be exactly the ones that they need. Because, I mean, if you can code proficiently in Java, we can get you coding proficiently in Python in a very short period of time, right? Mm-hmm. So the technical requirement is you have to be able to code proficiently in the case of a software developer, which was the highest in demand. Take note, those of you that are planning on looking and going to college, right? So, and also managers wanted SQL, Java, and Python, but of course, cloud is important too. And those could just be places to host your code. Like when I read that, I totally envisioned like a cup of coffee and a pet snake, like inside of a cloud, like up in the sky. But I mean, it was just me.
No, I thought those 2 stats were interesting, right? We've been talking about the developer and the developer's opportunity in the future, especially on the security side. And we'll get into this in number 4 when we talk about the technologies for those cloud and skill sets as well. But so what you've got is this really high demand for developers as we continue to move down this DevOps pathway. But they also have a really great opportunity in the security space because as these things come together, then you talk about the skill sets they're looking for. Yeah, SQL and Java and Python are still high, but you're also seeing more demand for the cloud resources because now deploying in the cloud, securing in the cloud, all these things are going to come to the forefront as we continue to move into 2020. But then number 4 was technologies and methodologies shaping the future of cloud computing. So here you've got edge computing and IoT, you've got DevOps, AI, ML, right? Okay, we'll skip AI and ML because we already talked about it. But I mean, we are definitely seeing some interesting methodologies and trends for these developers, and security is a big part of where this industry is moving.
Well, yeah, I mean, just containers and Kubernetes, right, are a huge part of those technologies and methodologies that can shape, in knowing how to make an API out of something. Those are the conversations that, you know, we're having today in the office. Is how do we design this again? There's all this new stuff to be able to break it apart and make it talk to each other and host it all in the cloud. And what features do we need there? What do we want there? And that kind of thing.
Yep, agreed. And the only silver lining in this report for us non-developer folks is at least 1 in 5 teens are considering a career in technology. I hope it becomes higher than that. I mean, anybody who's in this environment knows we have a lot of job security in this industry because there is a lot of demand out there.
Tons of demand. And I mean, the devil's in the detail, right? I mean, it was 21% currently considering and 27% may consider in the future. You know, and you know, I hope those that are out there who are saying I may consider in the future move up the stack and go to currently considering, honestly.
Absolutely. I mean, there's definitely jobs out there for people in this tech space. So if you're a teen and you don't know what you want to do, go into coding and learn, because your opportunities will really open up once you get into the work environment.
Please.
Yeah, right. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.